Hello hockey fans, Oddman Rush here and welcome back to another video. During his 11-year NHL career, Sean Avery was one of the biggest agitators the National Hockey League has ever seen. I mean, the guy racked up over 1,500 penalty minutes, he had beef with numerous players across the league, and he received his fair share of punishments both on and off the ice. The guy couldn't cross the line since he didn't know where it was to begin with. Though he got up to plenty of hijinks during his lengthy NHL career, and though he garnered a questionable reputation during this time, Avery never did anything bad enough to prompt any serious attention from the league itself. That is, until April of 2008, when his controversial actions during an early playoff game led to a new league rule less than 24 hours after the contest concluded. But how did he do it? How did Avery cause such a commotion that the league was forced to amend their rulebook? Well, let's take a look at the now infamous incident and find out, shall we? So in today's video, join me as we explore when Sean Avery changed the NHL rulebook. Now before we jump into this crazy story, let's start with a brief look at Avery's NHL career so we can see exactly how he ended up in this rather unique situation. An undrafted player during each of his years of eligibility, Sean Avery would sign as a free agent with the Detroit Red Wings back in 1999. After spending another year in the OHL, and after turning pro in 2000, the Canadian forward would earn his first call-up to the Red Wings during the 2001-02 NHL season. From there, Avery would go on to spend parts of 11 seasons in the league. He would suit up for 4 different teams during this span, most notably with the New York Rangers, and he would make a name for himself as both an effective enforcer and a skilled agitator, scoring 247 points and registering 1,533 penalty minutes in 580 regular season games. Though he produced a solid career in the league, Avery faced his fair share of controversies throughout this tenure, as his questionable actions on and off the ice ensured that he encountered plenty of scrutiny along the way. For example, Avery is said to have bullied former Kings forward Dustin Brown over his lisp. He was fined $2,500 by the league after supposedly mocking Leafs forward Jason Blake during his battle with leukemia, and he was suspended indefinitely from the league after several NHL players began to date what Avery lovingly referred to as his sloppy seconds, though this suspension ended up lasting just 6 games. And that's not even mentioning the various long-running feuds that he held with numerous players across the league. So yeah, Avery had quite the reputation in the NHL. So how did Avery change the rulebook? Sure, he did some pretty questionable things during his career, but why does he have a specific rule that's practically named after him? Well, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to take you back to April 13th, 2008. When Avery, who was a member of the New York Rangers at the time, suited up for Game 3 of the Eastern Conference quarterfinals against the New Jersey Devils. With the Rangers up 2-0 in the series, and with the game tied 1-1 early in the second, New York found themselves on a 5-on-3 power play just 5 minutes into the period, thanks to an elbowing penalty by Vitaly Vishnevsky, as well as a delay of game minor by Bryce Salvador. With the Rangers on the 2-man advantage, and with them eager to capitalise on this newfound opportunity, New York's first power play unit took to the ice to try and get the job done. Now on this unit was Sean Avery, who was tasked with parking himself in front of the net, screening the goalie to take his vision away, and trying to whack in any rebounds that came his way. Thanks to his unexpected actions in the moments that followed though, Avery would soon write his name into the league's history books. As the puck was dropped and the power play began, the Rangers regrouped in their own zone following a Devils clear down the ice. They moved up through the neutral zone and set themselves up in the Devils' territory. After the puck was dumped deep into New Jersey's zone, and after he battled along the boards towards the side of the net, Avery skated to the Devils' crease and parked himself in front of the goaltender. However, instead of putting his back to the goal and keeping track of the play just like every other player would do in his situation, Avery decided to face the net. He looked straight at Devils goaltender Martin Brodeur, and he began trying to block the netminder's vision, mimicking his opponent's movements and waving both his hands and his stick in front of Brodeur's face. While this unconventional strategy proved pretty effective at distracting his opponent and blocking his view of the play, you can imagine that Martin Brodeur wasn't too happy to be on the receiving end of these antics. So much so that the netminder gave Avery a few whacks with his stick, and he even threw his glove in the forward's face to try and get him to stop, almost risking another penalty in the process. That said, Avery's opponents weren't the only ones who were unimpressed by these actions, as by facing Brodeur, Avery was unable to communicate effectively with his own Rangers teammates, and he had all but taken himself completely out of the play, rendering him less of a scoring option and more of an unnecessary anchor on the power play. In fact, Avery's teammates were so frustrated that Rangers forward Scott Gomez skated up to Avery midway through his antics and told him to knock it off so they could go ahead and score a goal. Despite equally negative responses from opponents and teammates alike, Avery kept facing Brodeur and continued his hijinks until the Devils cleared the puck down the ice. Though the Rangers would regroup in their defensive zone once again, and though fans wondered whether Avery would try his luck once more, the forward did something far greater instead. As he skated up the ice, he redirected a pass from Gomez on the doorstep, and he scored a power play marker to put the Rangers up 2-1 in the game. Well played, Avery. Well played indeed. Despite getting under his opponent's skin, and despite putting further salt into the wound with his tie-breaking tally, these antics ultimately wouldn't lead to a W, as the Devils took a 4-3 victory in overtime to cut the Rangers' series lead in half. However, all anyone could talk about post-game was Avery's actions on the power play. After all, although Avery's hijinks were completely legal according to the NHL's rulebook, these antics were considered by many to be unsportsmanlike in their nature, and they weren't exactly well regarded by other players across the league. So much so that a lot of people had something to say in the aftermath of this incident. For example, Devils goaltender Martin Brodeur shared his disbelief at the events, saying, "I've played for 15 years in this league, I've been watching games for 33 years, I had never seen that in my life. I don't think that kind of behaviour should be done in front of the net, but there's no rule for it." Montreal Canadiens netminder Carey Price said, "It's almost an unwritten rule. It's like when you're a kid in the back seat that's going, 'I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you.' When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I would probably try and get in your bubble like that." While Stars goalie Marty Turco said, "If they have to change the rule because somebody wants to be unsportsmanlike and deface the game of hockey, I'm all for it." Not only that, Pittsburgh Penguins defenseman Ryan Whitney chimed in by saying, "I've never seen that before. It seemed odd to me. He's not in a position to get a rebound if there is one because his stick's up in the air." Devils forward John Madden said, "I just find it childish and I don't agree with any of it," while Penguins forward Gary Roberts simply said, quote, "He's an idiot." So yeah, most players really didn't like Avery's antics, did they? Having seen these events unfold and having heard the responses post-game, the NHL decided that they had to act quickly to nip these antics in the bud. Less than 24 hours after the game had concluded, on April 14th, 2008, the NHL announced that they had made an amendment to their unsportsmanlike conduct rule which forbid players from repeating Avery's actions. As League Director of Hockey Operations Colin Campbell explained, an unsportsmanlike conduct minor penalty will be interpreted and applied, effective immediately, to a situation when an offensive player positions himself facing the opposition goaltender and engages in actions such as waving his arms or stick in front of the goaltender's face, for the purpose of improperly interfering with and or distracting the goaltender as opposed to positioning himself to try and make a play. So thanks to his questionable actions that night, and thanks to their negative reception from both players and league officials alike, Sean Avery had just added a new clause into the NHL's rulebook. A rule that has since been dubbed the Sean Avery rule. There's certainly worse ways to go down in history, that's for sure. Now, if you want my opinion on all this, I can't quite decide whether Avery's actions were pure genius or complete and utter stupidity. After all, Avery clearly didn't show the greatest sportsmanship by distracting the goaltender in this way, and I can certainly understand Brodeur's frustration, as everyone seems to agree that doing something like that so blatantly was kind of a dumb move. But that being said, there was no rule stating that Avery couldn't do what he did, and his antics were completely legal within the NHL's rulebook. So why shouldn't he be allowed to do what he did? Also, I can understand why the league shut it down so quickly, since other players attempting to replicate these antics was the absolute last thing that they would have wanted, but it also seems a little excessive to completely ban anything similar like this less than 24 hours after the contest ended. I mean, the likelihood of any other player not named Sean Avery even considering doing what he did was minimal at best, let alone actually going through with it and trying their luck, right? I guess it's a good thing that it didn't happen again, and banning it completely was probably the right move in the long run, but it was still a pretty ballsy move by Avery that seemed very effective at the time. So maybe it was stupid and genius. But regardless of whether it was right or wrong, Sean Avery's antics in April 2008 earned him a pretty special place in the league's history books. I mean, the guy completely turned his back on the power play, he focused solely on getting under Brodeur's skin, and he scored the tie-breaking goal less than a minute after these antics. If that isn't some rockstar level stuff, I don't know what is. Say what you want about his actions that night, or the negative response from across the league, but Avery thought outside of the box. He pushed the rules to their breaking point, and he forced the league to add a new amendment in his honour. There aren't many players that can say the same, are there? And on that note, I'm going to end today's video. That was the story of Sean Avery and how he single-handedly changed the NHL rulebook. What do you guys think about Avery's antics, or the rule that was implemented as a result? Do you think that Avery was a genius that night, or do you think that the league were right to shut it down immediately? Do let me know in the comments below, I would love to hear what you guys have to say. But thank you so much for watching, guys, I really do hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye! A big thank you to Bexy93, Burned Retinas, Drew Fawcett, Houston NG, Raquel and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.